Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening for you all around the world, and to anyone under my voice today. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend, and I would like to talk to you today mostly on the white matrix, but also to be more direct on the white matrix, mostly on, as I promised before, the policies that are crippling and even completely destroying the black race in America. I'm going to touch on some in this small video, and I'm going to continue to touch on many others in subsequent videos, time permitting, of course. And before I get to a reparation plan, now I'm going to get to the reparation aspect in a moment because I know this is a word that generally triggers those in a white matrix. As a matter of fact, I have mentioned many times to many people the word reparations, and the first thing you could see is the tenseness that comes up in them. Without even submitting a plan to them or even a suggestion of a plan to them, their first reaction is generally not only defensive but violently defensive. And their usual thoughts are, if they express them, are blacks don't deserve reparations. And they will come up with any possible word in something to defend their stance, even if it has absolutely nothing to do with reality, truth, or even a stand on any kind of moral principle. So I would like to read something to you all, and I think this is going to more aptly define where I'm trying to go with this. Uh, as I stated in other videos, I'm a Christian, and I want to be able to get this information out as best as I can, of course. Um, and I want to make sure that the information that you're getting is information that is the very best for you yourself to make a determination on what you yourself think of this situation. Because in this situation, really briefly, in this situation with reparations, your vote actually does count. Your vote is going to count more than any vote in the history of mankind. I firmly believe that. Your one vote is going to do more in history than the founding fathers did in the Revolutionary War. And the reason why I say that is because it's going to alter the history of relations and one of the most powerful nations in the history of the world. Because if there's peace and love in our borders, then America can truly consider itself the greatest nation in the world and could bring peace and love to the other corners of the earth instead of the pure destruction that it has throughout the years. So let me read this to you all, if you do not mind. Uh, I'm going to read this out of the book of Matthew. And I pray that you would actually really listen to this because this is a very important thing. And this is a setup for what I'm really trying to achieve here. Trying to achieve something that's very important. And it requires all of us to actually search ourselves first, which is what the white matrix does not want you to do. But in order to come out, we have to start confronting some realities that we do not want to confront. So let me read this to you. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, for you are like whited monuments, which indeed appear beautiful on outside, but inside you are full of dead men's bones, and you are unclean. Even so, appear outwardly righteous unto men, but within you are full of hypocrisy and sin. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, because you build the tombs and monuments of the prophets that were sent to you, and you make them beautiful on the outside. And I say, and you say to yourselves, rather, if we had been in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers with them in killing and murdering the prophets. Wherefore, you are witnesses to yourself that you are the children of them which killed the prophets. Fill yourself up to the measure of your fathers. You hypocrites, you serpents, you vipers, how could you escape the damnation of hell? Now, this is in the book of Matthew 23. I advise anyone to read it, whether you're religious or not, because that point in which I just made, I would say Christ made actually, is extremely, extremely strong. Okay? Because here you have a people, these guys, and this, of course, is not an indictment on all the Israeli people. Of course, this is the leadership in which he was speaking to that was in Jerusalem at that time. And he noted to them, because they were persecuting him and all of his righteous standing, to try to unite the people in one thing: repentance and love for one another. No more disputes against each other. No more anger, resentment. No more situations where one thought they were superior, one thought that they were following the laws of God and were moral, the ones who had the moral high ground in these situations. Instead, he said, you know what? None of you have the moral high ground. So why don't you just allow me as God to give you a moral high ground that's higher than both of you, so that both of you see you fail and you can both stop pretending that you are the better brother and the other one is not. And by that friction, a nation that was chosen by God to be a blessing to the world was a curse to themselves first, and also to the world at that time, because of that leadership. As I once said again, because of the leadership. So now, how does that tie into what we're discussing today with reparations? It ties in perfectly. Because many people believe today, when they hear the word reparations, let's try it this way then. And I've done this online and offline with certain people I've spoken with. Let's not call it reparations, because that's going to trigger you or someone else. Let's not call it reparations. Let's call it class action lawsuit. That make you feel better? Because I find that even those in the white matrix have little trigger words that makes them happy at the destruction of others. It's sad, but it is true. So I want you to do a little exercise with me uh, that I believe it can help prove, and many of you, not all of you, of course, many of you that especially if you're watching my video, you're probably already keenly aware are some deficiencies in yourself, just like there are deficiencies in me. But the point is not to find deficiencies and to be upset with them or some other thing, but rather to find the deficiencies so that you know what you need to work on to remove those deficiencies. But let's try a little exercise here. And I'm going to hopefully do an exercise in which you can appreciate the area of interest that I hope people will have the in this field of reparations for people of color. Now, if you would like to, please, I want you to close your eyes and I want you to think. I want you to clear your mind as much as possible, please, if it's possible. And I want you to take a couple deep breaths. Okay, I only took one, but I'm cheating. Now, I'm gonna say some words, and I want you to. You don't have to tell me, but tell yourself, or maybe tell your loved one, how you receive these words. And when I say how you receive these words, does it make you tense? Does it make you happy? Does it make you sad? Psychologists uses this, uh, and often they use this often, I should say, because it's supposed to help the person identify things that affect them in life. And so I would like to do that for you today and see if you can evaluate your pluses and minuses. Okay, so let's start. I will say Native Americans. Next word, Japanese Americans. Next word, World War II. Next word, the Marshall Plan. Next word, Jews. Next word, Holocaust. Next word, Holocaust survivors. Next word, Black Americans. Next word, American Dream. Next word, 40 acres and a mule. And finally, the last word, righteousness. Did you get those words? How do you think you did on that? Were there moments, and there's no pass or fail on this. The well, there is a fail if you're not genuine, be honest, or curious about your reactions, then that's a fail, obviously, because you're not being genuine. You're not even trying. But there's no pass or fail at all on this, on how you responded or reacted to these things. Absolutely nothing wrong with how you reacted. Even if you reacted in hatred, being upset, um, some other thing, you are an individual. And so there is a very good chance, especially if you're a person that's white. Let's say when I said Black Americans, you got upset or angry or some other thing. That's an emotion. And see, no one can necessarily tell you if that emotion is right or wrong when you have that emotion in that situation. Do you know why? Because you are an individual, you're not a group. God forbid a person with a skin color that is brown or black uh, raped you or stole your property or murdered you or some other thing. But if whatever it happened for you in your life, you may have a legitimate reason to have tensed up and be angry, to be upset, to be happy, to be sad. As an individual, your world outlook generally depends on some of your experiences. So, for me to say some of those words, you may have an outlook on an entire race, an entire situation, just by some personal experience that you had. So, we're trying to tie this in together. And again, I'm not telling you that there's a right or wrong. There's only a right with this if you actually went through the exercise honestly with integrity. Now, how does this tie into reparations? Let's start on how this ties into reparation. And again, I wish I had more time to exercise this today. I'm running on a tight schedule today, but I intend to make multiple videos so that more information pours out and we can expound the information I'm speaking about. And I also encourage any person to actually go search this information themselves rather than wait for these videos because my education is not more important than your education. My thoughts on this are not more important than your thoughts. We need each other. We stand together or we die alone. And so I'm making these videos on an appeal for all of you to stand with me so we don't die alone. Now, let me get into that rather than stop procrastinating in time right now. The reason why I gave so many of those examples, which I just explained, but I'm also going to explain something else. When you say reparations to so many people, I think in over the history that many people, especially whites, have gotten a negative tied in response to that. Case in point, I just simply put up an article yesterday on my Facebook page. Uh, if you are interested in doing so, I have other sites in which on Facebook, which I post all kinds of articles that can be useful for you. I'm also an administrator of American Patriots Against Tyranny, which is a site on uh, Facebook also. Please come join us. I'll sign you up. You're welcome to discuss anything as long as you're respectful, as long as you're not cursing or such other things, and you'll participate. And please come join us. We have quite a big amount of people, and we would love to have you also. Now, when I started discussing uh, the things that I discussed, and the answers that I asked from you to actually gauge your reaction and your response to. I use words like Native American, World War II, the Marshall Plan, Holocaust survivors, all these other things. Words are powerful. And so saying reparations, it appears through all my experience now, and even though I still use it, I'm still using it in these videos. Uh, their power is in how it gets other people to react. And sometimes there's a scripture that says, a brother offended is harder to be won than a great city. And I find that to be true. Sometimes uh, certain trigger words will make a person offended. Not because it makes any logical sense whatsoever. But sometimes it does. Sometimes it's from some personal grievance with a certain person that they extend to a race or group or some other thing. So, when I say Native Americans in World War II and Marshall Plan and Holocaust survivors, I found it interesting when I started questioning myself and others how I reacted to these things. So, I'm going to start using words that you probably have not um, equated with the struggle for reparations for people of color. I'm going to start using them for people of color because I know that sometimes the response uh, and the reactions are from certain triggering words. Let's start. In 1952, rather, Germany paid 3.45 billion Deutschmarks to the Holocaust survivors. I mentioned that before. They just paid them that way. Just paid them right off the bat. Um, that was roughly about. It's actually far more than 5 million right now. It's probably worth. I mean, billion rather. Right now, it's probably worth several hundred billion in comparison because of the exchange of money the way it is today. So they paid them an awful lot of money, which allowed them to, in a very short time, build up their entire nation in Israel with the money they received from the Germans' reparations. Um, and Native Americans, or what people still, for some ungodly reason, call American Indians, which makes zero sense, but I digress. They received land and billions of dollars for various benefits and programs. Okay? Japanese Americans. After World War II, for those who will not know, Japanese Americans came into this country. They were already Japanese Americans. It's not that they were people just came from Japan and then, hey, they're immigrants kind of here, have been here for a week or two, and they're thrown in concentration camps here. No, these were people who had been in here 100 years and, until present day. And they were all, just because they were Japanese, were thrown into a concentration camp. But guess what? They received $1.5 billion, or which came out to basically $20,000 a person. That's what the Japanese received. Okay. And when I mentioned the war, the Marshall Plan, the United States also paid the Israeli people, even though there was not any Jews here that the United States were persecuting. So even a people that the United States was not persecuting, we gave reparations to. Today, Israel is one of the wealthiest countries in the world. And guess what? We still give $3.8 billion a year to Israel. I'm going to say that again. We still give $3.8 billion to Israel, but you can't give anything to people who you know you have done wrong to. I'm going to go a little further. Didn't I want all of you people to look this up if you ever get a chance to. It's called Operation Paperclip. I'm going to say that again. Operation Paperclip. Do you know at the same time that we were fighting Germany and vilifying them and saying Adolf Hitler must go, at the same time we were coming to the conclusion of World War II, Germans were coming over here And we were bringing them over here and paying them to be over here. Talk about consorting with the enemy. We brought scientists, teachers, such other people over here from Germany, many of them in the highest positions in Germany, in murder, in executions, in tortures, in all kind of other things that these people were in. Some of the most vile, evil people in the history of the world. We brought them over into the United States under Operation Paperclip. Interesting, don't you think? The Japanese, who we also were at war with, they, oh, well, they got to be in the concentration camp. Can't trust them. But the white Germans, who we're literally at war with, and bring the, not some good Germans, not some Christians being persecuted there, not some Muslims being persecuted there, not some people who are under persecution, not some women and children who don't want to be involved in that. No, no. We brung over scientists and such others to do very wicked things to many people. That's your white matrix. That is your definitive answer onto what they think of people. That's not white. So let's continue here. So we know that under operations after the Civil War, that there was given something called 40 Acre and the Mule. Its actual name is called Field Order 15 under Sherman, one of the generals, William Sherman. It was one of the generals who, once they had basically conquered the South, there were 400,000 acres of confiscated land that many slaves had remained on and were on, at that time. Now, they were on the land at that time, and so Sherman said, you know what, this is a reparation. This is what you guys are owed. And so for today, I'm going to use the word reparation for that. I'm going to say this is for your lost wages. This is for your lawsuit you have against them. So in your class action lawsuit of many members who are owed something, you former black slaves are now given permission to take over this land. Right then, as if this is a coincidence, by the way, it's not. Lincoln was killed. So while the land is about to be divided and given to these blacks who uh, won the class action lawsuit, Lincoln's assassinated, and his replacement, Andrew Johnson, immediately repeals the order and gives the land back to the same slave owners in which they took it from, effectively rewarding them and giving them their reparations that the class action lawsuit had already given to the former black slaves. It's frustrating for me. I'm constantly trying to hold my emotions on this because this is not the first time nor the last time things like this happened in America. It happens continuously even to this day. I'll give you another example and then I'm going to probably end this video because I don't want it to be too long. During the 1930s, when the stock market was had fallen in 1929, the major fall, Franklin Roosevelt uh, put in some policies called the New Deal, which is what I asked you about. Many of you, I'm sure, just said the New Deal, have no idea about it. You probably had a negative or, a non negative reaction, or maybe it sounded exciting to you. But this is something that Franklin Roosevelt instituted in the early 1930s to help stimulate the American people. Of course, I think you know what's going to happen because knowing that the blacks were not considered the American people, I think we once again will know exactly how this ended up. So he implemented a new series of policies that he called the New Deal. It was roughly 50 billion in that day, which was roughly $50 trillion in our day. Please listen to this. Two policies that the New Deal really was addressing was some. It was supposed to address racial wrongs. I like that word. That the president said this was going to redress America's racial wrongs. So he put something called the GI Bill and Social Security. These were to correct some of the racial wrongs. So I'm going to read part of this article, and I want you to pay particular attention to how the white matrix puts these things together. It says two particular policies of the New Deal fell short in redressing America's racial wrongs: the GI Bill and Social Security. Though white and black Americans fought in World War II, black veterans could not redeem their post-World War benefits like their white peers. Big surprise. While the GI Bill was mandated federally, it was implemented locally. The presence of racial housing covenants and redlining among local municipalities prohibited blacks from utilizing federal benefits. White soldiers were afforded the opportunity to build wealth by sending themselves and their children to college and by obtaining housing and small business grants. Regarding Social Security, two key professions that would have improved equity in America were excluded from legislation: domestic and farm workers. These omissions effectively excluded 60% of blacks across the U.S. and 75% in southern states who worked in these occupations. Simply put, so for the people who actually need it, who were 75% of whom were probably people of color, there's no possible benefit for them. But for anybody that was white, pretty much every white person, not all, there are exceptions, pretty much the majority, greatest majority of whites receive the finances, despite those black Americans having to pay taxes. So their tax monies were going not to help them, but to help the very people who had enslaved them and kept them enslaved the whole time. It's a really depressing thing to think. But I'm setting these things up and I'm going to try to spoon feed you this because these are just certain examples in history of blacks continually being excluded from even the smallest amount of things that could help them. It was designed to keep us impoverished and keep crime high, angst high, anger high, depression high. And I hope I demonstrated some of that. So we're going to keep on addressing this. I did say I want to make this video as short as possible. I've gone over the time sequence in which I wanted to go on today. But we're going to continue in this series and we're going to go much more deeper, much more direct on policies that have been instituted more recently in American history, even as little as a couple of years ago, and even as little as this year. So stay with me, I pray. For all of those who are watching this, wherever you are, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I should have said that. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. But I think you all have received that well. I pray everyone is well, whom I spoke with. I pray everyone's family is well. And I pray you got something out of this video and pray that you stay with me as we continue to explore the class action lawsuit that has been heard from the beginning, but has constantly been thrown into the white matrix. Thank you once again for joining me. Have a wonderful day.